Welcome to the meeting of the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission for Monday, May the 15th, 2023. We'll start with a roll call and I'll go last.
Deborah Meyerson here.
Randy Cassidy here.
Deb Hutton here. Next we'll have a reading of the minutes for May, oh no.
Do you want to do
we'll
staff
have
present?
Staff present, please. Thank you.
Start. I'm Beth Cade, Corporation Counsel.
Larry Allen, Legal Department.
Christina Finley, Hand Department.
John Zodi, Hand Department.
Jeff Underwood, Controller.
Alex Crowley, Director of Economic Sustainable Development.
Is that it? Okay, well, first we'll have on the agenda the minutes for May the 1st, 2023, and the executive summary for the same date. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve minutes as presented.
Deborah Meyerson, I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next item is examination of claims for two dates. April the 28th, 2023 for $59,839.10 and May the 12th, 2023 for $32,708.24. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the examination of claims from April 28th and May 12th, 2023.
I'll second that motion.
I have a first and second. All in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next item is payroll registers, again for two dates. For April the 21st, 2023 for $33,875.98. And for May the 5th, 2023 for $34,575.96. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? And if not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, passes unanimously. Next is report of officers. Will there be a director's report?
There will, Madam Vice President. Good evening, Commissioners. Just a few things. I do want to let the Commission know that, I think I'd mentioned this before, but our annual action plan for HUD is undergoing revisions, and so we are scheduled 2 public hearings for that. We've done a series of those. You all approved projects, but we're going to do 2 more of those. One is scheduled for tomorrow night at 5 o'clock in the Dunlap room. The other is scheduled for next Tuesday at 5 o'clock in the Dunlap room. Those previously and normally would be at an RDC meeting, but given the length of the agenda and everything's on the RDC's plate this spring, we went ahead and scheduled those at other times, but certainly wanted to make you guys aware of that as well in case you had any comments or knew of anyone. Those have been properly noticed in the paper and we're good to go, but I wanted to share that with you. We are going to be in the midst of hearing about a planned unit development that was filed last week with the Planning and Transportation Department for about 140 acres at the Sudbury Farms property on the south side of the city. That is proposed to be a very large development, and there is a consideration for a TIF district there. And so I want to sort of just bring that up, maybe coming the RDC's way later this spring or summer, and want to just sort of introduce the issue. And we're working with the development group and other city staff to see what that looks like, but it could be coming down your way on considering a different kind of TIF district for that area. So, and finally, happy to report that we have hired an assistant director for HAND. Her name is Anna Killian Hansen. She's a Bloomington native. She's got a lot of experience in the real estate and housing industry. Will join us on June 12th, and we had our newest neighborhood compliance officer start today, so we will be back at full staff at HAND by June 12th. So we're happy about that. So happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Is the TIF district under consideration? I mean, obviously it's very preliminary, but would that be a residential TIF or?
No, well, not right now. What's under consideration, that most of that is currently in the consolidated TIF, so the question would be if that would continue to be in the consolidated TIF or if it would be a project-based TIF. Right now, residential TIF, depending on where the types of housing go, would determine what is more beneficial from a TIF perspective, if it's residential or if it stays commercial, depending on the assessment of the type of house. So not quite there yet, but just like I said, want to introduce the issue, and we'll keep you all updated. I'm sure it'll be talked about quite a bit in the coming months. So thank you.
Thank you, Director. Is there a legal report?
I have no report, but I'm happy to answer any questions, Commissioners. Unless my boss says otherwise.
Is there a treasurer's report?
Same as Larry, no report, happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Is there a business development report?
None today, it's a long agenda, so I'll defer today.
Okey doke. So we'll start with new business. And let me get down to the number. Two more pages.
That's page 28.
I know. One more page. So resolution 2341. Is there anyone to speak to
The
this?
first new business item, I'm sorry, there are two presentations we have for new business before we get to the resolutions. Acting President, the first one is going to be the Hopewell Perspective Owners Representation presentation.
Mhm.
My apologies.
No, I didn't see that. I did, but I forgot
Um,
it. So who's speaking to that?
Well, I'll open it up, and then I see Deb Kuntz on the line there. But as we told you at the May 1st meeting, we've been going through the process of determining the best course for an owner's development representative for the Hopewell project, and we have narrowed that down to our recommendation. And what we'd like to do is have them present to you tonight, and then we will come back to you the next meeting or so with other things, depending on where all this goes. So, Deb, did you want to say anything to open it up?
Yeah, I thought it would be also helpful to just remind the commission about the process that we've gone through. It's been fairly extensive, where we interviewed 5 different firms. We then shortlisted to 2 firms for U3 Advisors, who is the firm that we are going to hear from tonight. They have not only been through 3 interviews, but they've also provided additional documentation at least 2 or 3 times. So we put them through the ringer so far, but we expect you to do the same tonight. And tonight is about learning a little bit more about them, what they can do for the commission and for Hopewell in particular, and bringing more developers to the table, more opportunities for development, and really to bring that expertise of development to the team. What you're going to hear from U3 Advisors tonight is you're going to hear a lot of strong affordability experience, deep sustainability experience, a design excellence that is represented in the past work, and the ability to collaborate with, particularly in towns where there is kind of that town and gown opportunities, but they also have that regional and national reach that we think is going to be important to bring the right developers here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd Stern of U3 Advisors, if he can introduce his team. He's going to take you through a small PowerPoint, and then we'll open it for questions.
Thanks so much, Deb. Appreciate the introduction. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So first, let me just say thank you for the opportunity to meet with you tonight and to tell you a little bit about myself, my colleagues, our team, and how I think we can approach this generational and transformational opportunity. Privileged to have spent this much time with Deb and the team, and appreciate the chance to be with you. By way of introduction, so I'm Todd Stern. I'm a managing director and partner at U3. I have worked in different areas of commercial real estate and real estate finance for close to 25 years. I began my career working at Goldman Sachs in their municipal finance department, doing tax-exempt bond deals for universities, municipalities, and other exempt issuers. And then after graduate school, went back there and worked for a number of years investing in ground-up mixed use and mixed income development, including transactions in new markets tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, historic tax credits, a variety of the tools that we all use every day in economic development. Worked for a number of years after that for a private developer, and learned about all the reasons why great private developers sometimes fail at development. It was an abject lesson in how to develop and sometimes how not to develop. And then I joined U3 years ago, and I'm responsible for our New York office. So in this role, a lot of what I do is advise our clients, both municipal or nonprofit clients, on how to navigate exactly this type of situation where we are at the edge of municipal or nonprofit-owned land and interacting with the private development market. Having worked on multiple sides of the table with and against developers, we both have a pretty good network of folks that we've worked with around the country who do develop, but also a pretty good perspective on, where the capital markets are at any given time, how developers are thinking about risk and deployment of capital, and where we think some of the key points of negotiation will tend to land, not just on purchase price or ground rent, but on many of the other terms that will inevitably come up in a protracted, multi-phase, mixed-use negotiation. That's just a bit about me. Let me also invite my colleague Eric Anderson to introduce himself.
Thank you, Todd. I also want to just acknowledge staff and this process and how appreciative we are of the opportunity for the deep engagement throughout. I'm Eric Anderson, Vice President with U3, and would be the project manager for this initiative. I have a background starting in corporate finance and accounting world with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then after going back to school for urban planning, worked for a number of years in municipal economic development before joining U3 just a little bit after Todd, about 7.5 years ago, and having the privilege of working with him and the great rest of our team, a number of members who you see here on all those projects that Todd talked about in terms of finding that right balance, helping municipalities and universities find the right partners with that meaning a number of different things for advancing their development goals and economic development objectives.
We're also joined by our colleague Andrew Fix, who's an associate at U3. Andrew comes out of New York City's Economic Development Corporation, and so has had an upfront seat to municipal negotiation of public-private transactions, and is a financial and transactional powerhouse, and we're delighted to have him on our team. And then, not able to be here today, Jan Corneal, who's a senior advisor with U3, who formerly was a partner at Sasaki, and who brings just a 25-30-year career in great urban design, placemaking, design excellence, and then last but not least, my partner, our principal and co-founder, Karen Backus, who's traveling and couldn't be here tonight, but will also play the role of senior advisor, just bringing her 30-plus years of experience in real estate and transactions and economic development to our team. So broadly speaking, about U3, we're an advisory firm. We're not a broker, we're not a developer. We're about 25 people in a few different offices around the country, but primarily in Philadelphia, New York, Boston. Eric is in Los Angeles. And I would say that we are most active at the intersection of a municipal-owned land or nonprofit-owned land, at the edge of that space where you're engaging with the private development community. A lot of what we do across asset classes, whether it's retail, residential, office, lodging, is help our clients articulate their long-term mission objectives. I think here it's already quite clear what those objectives are, including a great mixed-use place, a sustainable, an environmentally sustainable location, an affordable location, but helping to articulate those mission objectives and then translate them into some kind of a long-term partnership with a developer where your interests are protected, but a developer is given enough financial return to motivate them to engage in this kind of a transaction where they're putting up capital. Over the course of our history at U3, collectively we've worked on close to $3 billion of transactions over the last decade, with a great deal of that in residential, in office, including equitable development, affordable housing development, and sustainable communities. So work in, but I'll focus on two specifically. So we tend to think of ourselves as working at three different scales, both the level of the parcel, the transaction, at the level of the campus, and understanding both what a campus plan looks like, and particularly how that campus plan relates to the edges of the campus or the place, because we want to make sure that whatever we're doing inside our area of influence has extensions or connectivity in terms of program, place, and people to the outside. And then certainly at the level of the community, where we're thinking about whatever we're doing, how does that translate into some kind of an equitable, sustainable place for the surrounding neighborhood. And again, that depends a lot on the nature of the programming we're putting into our place and how we make it both porous and accessible programmatically to folks inside and outside of that place. Looking at this wheel here, I won't go into all of the different areas. It's just a summary of some of the things that U3 does. But I think the two I want to focus on are our practice in real estate analysis and delivery, where we're just very versed with a lot of experience in acquisition, disposition, valuation, development, procurement, running solicitations, where we're structuring, we're finding developers, we're structuring relationships with developers, and then working alongside your legal team to negotiate those legal transactional structures. And then urban design and district planning, we're not, in our DNA, other than my colleague Jan, we're not planners or architects, but I think we have a pretty keen sense of placemaking and the importance of placemaking to helping our clients achieve their mission objectives. Placemaking done right can be a bridge or a gateway to sustainability and to affordability, to porosity and inclusivity, bringing different communities in to engage in the kinds of ground floor activations we might include. Placemaking not done well means, oftentimes, and there are myriad examples of this around the country, the first 30 feet of a building, dark glass, a place feeling uninviting, unwelcoming, unactivated, very much not the approach that we are seeking to bring here. Excuse me. Just very briefly, a little bit about our experience and some of the ways in which it's relevant, we think, to what we're doing here. And I won't go into these in any detail. I could spend hours on each one, but Hazelwood Green in Pittsburgh was a 200-acre former brownfield site on one of the riverfronts in Pittsburgh, where our role has been to first identify a master developer and then structure a master developer agreement between our client, which in this case was 3 Foundations, and this developer. And then now working with both of them, seeking to bring in some innovation-oriented anchor tenants to help catalyze development in this place. Because our clients happen to be Foundations, and because of their particular interests, we have a very, very strong platform for driving sustainability and affordability at the site. One of our clients is the Heinz Endowment, so a great deal of work around sustainability. And so we spent a lot of time looking at both renewable energy sources, microgrid technology, and other ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint at the site. Because Hazelwood happens to sit adjacent to a neighborhood that historically was served by steel mills but doesn't any longer, a lot of what we are doing is thinking about how to engage this community in economically interesting and compelling ways to create jobs, to create wealth, to create engagement, and to kind of pull this neighborhood back into an economic vital role as we build up all of this innovation space. At 16 Tech in Indianapolis, we've been working, as some of you may know, the last 8 or 9 months, Eric, with them on a range of the program and developer-related activities, helping think about how to tune their master plan to the current market, to the current set of opportunities that developers are looking at, to make the story compelling and to think about kind of the way that the innovation program at 16 Tech can kind of come together and accelerate. And Eric, I don't know if you want to say anything further about that.
And I think that's a great description. I'm going to be in Indy in the coming weeks to help them with some meetings with developers, and so we've as Todd suggested, 8 or 9 months been working through this process of helping them refine the plan, and we're now transitioning that into really vetting real opportunities, and I think I'm confident saying that we've been able to line up a great bunch of national best-in-class developers for them who are coming to visit and talk about a variety of engagement and development opportunities. So I think it's a great success.
Thanks, Eric. College Park, Maryland, while not directly applicable, I think the thing I wanted to call out here is we've had a probably 10+ year relationship with the University of Maryland and the city of College Park, Maryland, where our role has been to really set forward a long-term master plan vision, and then to help them go execute parcel by parcel, hotel, housing, retail, municipal services. That relationship's ongoing, and again, it's been one where we've looked at basically every asset class across the gamut, and just conducted a number of successful developer procurements to bring private capital to bear on College Park, Maryland. And then last but not least, we've done a few different things for the Atlanta Housing Authority over the years. Obviously a very different kind of client, but I think what we wanted to call out here was just our experience helping them to tee up the development of large, high-profile, high-impact sites that emphasize the importance of long-term affordable housing for Atlanta residents. Bowen Homes is just one of the engagements we're working on. We're working on a second for the Atlanta Housing Authority in the Midtown neighborhood of Atlanta, where we have for the last 2 years run a procurement to select a developer, a mixed income developer, and we're now negotiating development agreements there to bring that developer into the fold. Before I turn it over to Eric, just please pause and ask if there were any questions about anything I've said so far.
Nope. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. In that case, Eric, over to you.
Yeah, I'll jump in and talk a little bit about what our understanding of the Hopewell project is and our approach to it. We recognize that this is a tremendously important opportunity for the city of Bloomington, and the amount of effort that's already gone into preparing this and laying the groundwork. And our intention is to give it that credence, to give it that due of treating it as an important and generational opportunity that can really play a critical role in shaping the future of Bloomington. And kudos to the team here for all that you've accomplished already. Our understanding of the role here that we would play is to coordinate the site-wide strategy, and with a real eye towards those critical aspects of affordability and sustainability, amongst other efforts, including bringing in again national best-in-class developers, folks who know how to do this and are going to advance this project in ways that are really leading edge in terms of best practices. Ensure a competitive solicitation and developer negotiation where not just the financial lens, that's a critical piece of this, of course, ensuring that the city gets the right price here and gets the right returns on its investments on this project. But there are a number of other terms that are rolled up in that as well for the full implementation of the vision of this site. Again, thinking of it as a catalytic project that is going to pay dividends, not just bubble on its own, but for the future of the city.
It's just background noise, no question.
Oh, well.
Oh, did you have?
I'll hold my question.
Oh, sorry, did you have your hand?
And, yeah, I'll have a couple questions, but go ahead. And we'll
Okay,
finish
a couple
up.
more slides and then we'll open it up for questions. In terms of our process as we understand it, we're going to look at this from 3 major phases in terms of development strategy and feasibility analysis, looking at the different phases of the project, the different parcels, the project in a whole, making sure that we understand the goals and objectives that you're trying to accomplish here, quantifying, updating the market analysis, quantifying the demand drivers, making sure that we're proceeding in a way that is rooted in real fundamentals and feasibility and viability, doing the residual land value analyses and other evaluations that are necessary to make sure that we're coming into that with the most informed perspective possible, rolling into engagement with the developers, doing the outreach. There's multiple phases to this in terms of laying the groundwork. This is really part marketing and part soliciting information back in terms of how we frame the opportunity best to make it as attractive as possible, and again, to ensure that we're working towards the shared goals and objectives for the development, refining the procurement strategy that comes out of that, and then rolling into the formal procurement and deal negotiations, running the RFIs, leading those negotiations with the developer, doing additional due diligence to vet any developers that may that percolate up as prospective partners here and moving the project forward. And the one thing that maybe is not fully captured on here is the iterativeness of all of this, and understanding it's a multi-phase project, a multi-phase strategy, and as we think about each of the groups of parcels and the sequencing of rolling out solicitations for each of those, all of the inflection points where between the development engagement and the deal negotiations on any respective parcel or suite of parcels, continuing to think about the strategy all along, ensuring that the goals and objectives are still aligned, and iterating on that to make sure that we're moving things forward. Go ahead, Todd.
And if I could just add very briefly, all that said, I think we also understand from Deb that the clock is ticking, that we're already underway on 8, 9, and 10, and that there's an eagerness to move forward with the next tranche of blocks. And so I think we're going to be focused on making sure that we get very up to speed quickly on everything that's happened so far, on the market conditions, and then try to bring forward, our best recommendation we can on the first block, while also teeing up the second tranche. So just wanted to affirm that we're keenly aware that the clock is ticking here. I think that concludes our formal remarks, and happy to stay on for a while and answer any and all questions you may have.
Okay. First question, ladies. Randy Cassidy. Question in regards to, first off, just giving Bloomington, Indiana, and I think you've probably worked with Deb some on the 16 Tech Park. Is that a correct statement? Deb? Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's exactly how I'm connected with you three.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, it's good to have a familiar aspect. So the first question I have is, any of the 3 of you been to Bloomington physically?
I have not been to Bloomington.
Okay. And then, aha, which brings me to the next question. Since you're going to be in Indianapolis here in a couple weeks, would there be a possibility we could invite you down for a visit our community?
For sure. I mean, Eric, you can speak to that for sure, but I just want to affirm, were we to have the privilege of working with you, the first thing we do is we come as a group. And we're there for a day and a half or two to make sure that we have walked every inch of the development blocks, the surrounding neighborhood. That's a 100% a critical part of every exercise that we begin. But all that said, I know Eric's got other plans to be in town, and you can speak to your ability to come over, Eric.
I'd be thrilled to pop down while I'm in town. while I'm in Indy. Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Just like to ask that question so that the familiarity of our community as a whole is engaged as we look at, entertaining you to participate in our community for the long-term goal. So with that, when you see these timelines as a group, what kind of timeframes do you see based on your experience and examples of what you showed? You've got some experience from cradle to grave. So what kind of time frame do we look for the life of this to be able to be actually move into reality?
So what I've shared with Deb over the last several weeks, in my experience, it's not uncommon for a procurement process, developer engagement process, to be anywhere from certainly 9 months.
Sure.
Could be a little more. I think under 9 months tends to be fast, and that's because there are municipal boards, there's governance, there are public hearings, there's due diligence. I think also because we want to make sure we've given developers enough time to respond thoughtfully to a solicitation, to do the work that's required to come back to us with a great set of ideas. And then not least, of that 9 to 12 months, 6 months to negotiate definitive documents does not strike me as unusual, because there's, however, whether it's a purchase and sale agreement, if we're conveying fee simple land, or if it's a ground lease, that's just one of the documents. But if there's any public benefit involved, if we're negotiating tax increment, if we're negotiating a pilot or any kind of a tax credit, those tend to just add layers of complexity and time. So to my thinking, 9-10 months would not be unusual to have a pretty well-baked transaction. And at that point, once the developer is selected, we're going into a pre-development period where they're doing their schematic or design development, their production drawings, before they actually close on land. And depending on the size and the complexity of the phase, to get to production drawings might be, could be 6 to 9-10 months. And then at that point, you'd be in a position to close and be on that first phase in a financial closing and then begin construction. So does that answer your question, sir?
Well, I think I may have misstated how I was asking. When I say cradle to grave, to the time we actually see from a transactional standpoint where it would be able to be occupiable, take care of the needs that we've identified as a community, and actually be able to be utilized. I mean, this is the first step in a lengthy, ceremoniously wonderful thing for our community. But I understand the transactional aspect, Todd, but are we looking at 5 years? 3 to 5 years?
3 to 4 years.
Okay.
Right. So the pre-development phases that I talked about, the design development, and then let's say that's 18 months to 24 months, and then 18 to 24 months for construction before you open. So that puts you at maybe around 4 years.
Okay. Yeah, that just.
So Randy, if you don't mind, let me weigh in here a little bit here, because if you think about Hopewell, it's really going to come in probably 3 big groups, right? We've got blocks 8, 9, and 10, which we have some proposals for consideration already. So that's going to be on a faster track because we're through some of that already. So even if we're able to propose something back to the RDC maybe later this summer, like into the fall, how quickly can that developer get organized with, they're doing, in some of those cases, it's multifamily, sometimes it's single family, sometimes it's townhomes. When you have a product like a townhome, it's going to go faster. If you have a product like single family, it's going to go faster than, and if you have a smaller multi-use, it's, if we're doing blocks 1, 2, and 3, for instance, right, that one's going to be a little longer because we have 330 units, it's bigger buildings. And so when we think about this in 3 big groups, it's going to have a series of kind of off and on ramps is how I'm thinking about it as we see development happen. And very likely it could be in that 8, 9, and 10 area where we start to see those things first. So as Todd talks about 3 or 4 years, it can feel probably a little bit scary at times, but the reality is if we can get some of them going earlier with construction happening starting even in 2024, then we're starting to see that parallel with the infrastructure projects happening in construction at Phase 1 East. And then as we get developers on board, getting them starting construction in 24, and then several years of construction after that.
No, I'm not pushing for quick, I'm pushing for long-term quality for our community.
Yeah.
Is the reason I asked that. It took 100 years for us to get this opportunity, and we want to make sure we do it right for the next 100 years. Which brings me to the next question on timeline. When we looked at, what kind of expectations do you guys see as developers? Because clearly you have the financial end taken care of in regards to what you see, giving you're in the financial capital of the world. How we see the expectations the developers look at. As Deb indicated on 8, 9, and 10, we're looking to consider, of this meeting, we're looking to consider a infrastructure project to go ahead and set the baseline goals that we have infrastructure-wise. So when you see these development projects moving forward and we're bringing something to potential developers, financial, that we've already identified, how does that play in? Because we've spent a significant amount of time in the administration identifying what we need in engineering. Does that play in, or does that create roadblocks?
It does. I think that, to me, when I think about all of the work that's already happened in the city to prepare this opportunity, you have already begun to do a lot of pretty important work in sort of telling the story, bringing to bear, putting in place tax increment, some kind of a structure that helps to make this more financeable. I think that's an enormous body of work that you've already accomplished. You've already done the master plan, so you put forward a clear and coherent vision that developers can hopefully neatly slot into. So my hope is that accelerates the time frame, particularly for the first phase. The second and third phases will be easier because by then there will already be hopefully some market feedback that the developer world will have seen from the first phase. But I think in terms of the first tranche of development, the work you've already done may help to shorten that time frame. We'll have to see.
I would just add to that, Todd, I think we should acknowledge that we're in unique times in terms of capital markets and the ability to finance that we haven't seen in some time, and it's going to add some wrinkles to this. We all just need to be honest about that. I'm doing a project in Fort Worth, Texas right now. Very compelling project. We got a great response from prospective development partners, and we selected a preferred partner there. And we're still very confident about moving that project forward. But the reality is there are some tough conversations going on around their ability to finance the program they want there, and that may be the case here. But I think it's all the more reason to go out to broad pool of national best-in-class folks who know how to do this, who have the access to those deep financing pools and to creative structures for figuring out how to do this.
But it's also, just to add, I'm glad you raised that, Eric. It's also kind of market by market. In Pittsburgh, the office market is kind of in the tank right now. Utilization in downtown office is probably at 40%. Same time, the residential market's actually quite strong. And there are folks, there's new construction going on in the market at rents that are setting new thresholds, new high water marks in that city. And that's not uncommon. So I think it depends a lot kind of market by market and also asset class by asset class. And I don't want to sit here today on May 15th, we haven't even begun yet, prejudging the fact. I think this is why for every engagement we begin, there's an intense level of deep engagement that we start with by talking to all of you, by talking to folks in the market, by making ourselves, by engaging with all of the data that we can absorb about this market to make sure that we have a full and accurate picture of what asset classes are strongest, how capital is moving, et cetera.
Okay. Two other quick questions in regards to, you struck a chord with me in regards to microgrids and infrastructure cost sharing to keep the cost lowest for long term. How do you see those as you look at this overall picture, how any of that would tie in?
So microgrid specifically?
Microgrid, basically public infrastructure that helps reduce long-term expenses for residents and businesses that are there, so we can keep their cost structure down, so it's more attractive long-term to continue to stay instead of.
So mostly what I've seen to date is deals with solar providers where the incentives and the abatements for solar and sometimes wind are perhaps thickest through federal and state governments, much more so than microgrid technology or, say, for example, geothermal, where I have not seen as many of those transactions at a commercial scale take off yet. So again, I think the first low-hanging fruit conversations I think we want to advance are probably around solar, maybe wind, depending on land availability. I think the others have still proven, from what I've seen, more financially difficult to pull off in commercial transactions.
Okay.
And I would say that from a process standpoint, I think we're impressed that you guys have already been pursuing this through an RFI process first, not an overly prescriptive RFP, which you see a lot of people jump straight to. And I mean, we fully support that sort of exploratory RFI process where it provides the opportunity to get real feedback from the development community, from the folks who are going to provide you the input and feedback on how you can shape the opportunity, what investments you can make, how you can position this to make this as attractive and viable of an opportunity for them to partner in. So I think the engagement with the development community is going to share that much more insight about what some of the investments that the city can make on its side are that will best position us.
Okay. And then last question in regards to, if you've looked at the development plan that Deb and everybody has laid out, we've got an extensive large public plaza park area, which, as we're looking at it from a long-term standpoint, will need to make sure that it's maintained at the highest quality possible. With that is on the private-public development aspect that you've seen in regards to this, and I'll specifically ask Andrew since you're in New York accordingly. Have you seen anything in regards to utilization of like the Bryant Park Corporation model in regards to maintaining that we keep the highest quality while still be able to take care of diversity, equity, and inclusion in that area? How would that, have you ever seen that played into what you're discussing with large private-public partnership here?
So, well, let me just interject though. I mean, if I understand, it's the city that owns the garage and would retain ownership of the garage, correct?
At this point.
Right. So I guess you're asking, should you expect for developers to be making a requirement of you to maintain that garage in the highest possible
Not the garage.
condition?
Not the garage. The public park area that we have.
Yes. Sorry.
That's what I'm
100%
referring to. And
100%. I think that the plaza is the jewel of the crown, and is the thing that will continue to animate and activate this district over many, many years. I think that what I would imagine ultimately will happen is that I could imagine the plaza actually being conveyed from the city to a property owners association, of which you are one member, and that there are multiple developers are also members, and there's derived an allocation of common area maintenance charges to maintain that plaza at a standard that the owners collectively agree is the proper level of maintenance. I wouldn't want to necessarily see the city having to shoulder that maintenance obligation all on your own, nor do I think that would be appropriate or fair. And I think the magic is just establishing the level of maintenance and the level of activation and programming, figuring out what that budget is, and then negotiating a fair allocation of those charges across the multiple developers in this district. And that would essentially be what we see in the the Bryant Park bid, for example, is that the all those office tenants who surround 34th Street, Bryant Park benefit from and derive value on their upper floors from the presence of that park, and they pay in a common area maintenance charge into that business improvement district. Did I answer your question, sir?
Without a question. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Deborah?
I was interested in going back to, you mentioned the foundational hospital reuse master plan, and just interested in what your team thinks about the goals that are in there in terms of getting out of the gate on this project. Which goals may have the most marketability and interest from the target audience, and which might potentially need some adaptation? Given that that was released a couple years ago, we know that there's been market shifts since then. And just finally, what would your communication mode be if you see a need for tweaks or adjustments based on that vision to what you actually see when talking with prospective developers?
Yeah, so it's probably a little bit early for me, to be honest, to speak too much to, how those goals that have been articulated in the master plan will land today. But I think that, look, I'll say a couple things. On sustainability, even in the last 10 years, the market has moved, I think, very substantially. If you'd asked some developers 10 years ago, they would have said that in a lot of markets, LEED Silver was the baseline. I would argue that today, in many markets, LEED Gold is the price of playing. And I think that, to me, there are many developers who understand going in that, LEED Gold or LEED Gold eligible is a reasonable and I think market achievable level of responsibility. Similarly, on affordability, I think that it's the Overton window, if you will, the range of what's possible has shifted. And I think even over the last 2 or 3 years, as the country has sort of come out of what I will loosely call a George Floyd moment, I think there are cities across the country, large and small, that are reckoning anew, fresh, with what level of affordability they provide and what the best policy measures are for doing that. Historically, as you know, people would put up a 9% building or a 4% tax credit building, and that was over here, and then your market rate was over here. And I think that from a policy standpoint, there are better ways to go. And if we could figure out financing mechanisms that integrate affordability within a single building, that tends to just work better from a policy standpoint for everybody. And I think that is not, that I think is increasingly becoming the conventional wisdom among those who provide affordable housing. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, man, with terms of sort of anticipating how developers will respond. I need to come out to the market. I need to walk the place. I need to really study the materials before I can sort of really render a judgment as to how developers will respond here.
Thanks. And just
can you go ahead?
Sorry.
Can you answer Deborah's last part of the question, which is, if you do find those things, how would that communication happen? How does it go through? How does it get back to the RDC in those conversations?
So what we would normally do in an RFI or a request for expressions of interest or an RFP is we would ask them very specifically, to respond to our strong mission-based interest in affordability, sustainability, or what the other goals may be for the project, and take that market feedback. We listen, and then we would bring them in for interviews, not just with us, but with you, of course, where we'd ask them those same questions again. We would test them and ask them, how are you seeing these issues being addressed in other projects in which you're engaged? What are some of the financing or economic development tools that you're using to try and achieve these goals? So I think it's transparent. It's happening not just with us, but with you as well. And B, I think it's really important for us to call those items out and to put the developers to the test on those specific points.
Thank you.
Is that all?
That's all for me.
Deb Hutton here. I just have one question. To clarify, Todd, when you went through the 3 phases, the first phase of missions and goals, clarifying missions and goals, but in phase 2 and 3, we have these packets, and we have 8, 9, and 10 are already being sort of semi-developed or looked at, but we have lots of different individual packets and grouping of packets. So I just want to clarify that we're not talking about, and we talked with Randy about timing to get to the end goal of occupation, that we're not assuming that there'll be one developer for everything except 8, 9, and 10. That there may be multiple phase 2 and phase 3s for different groupings or different packets. Is that true?
That's 100% accurate. The phases, the 3 phases we showed are just kind of our process for stepping through the development, but
Right.
those will apply to each of these tranches of blocks. And yeah, we understand that you've not been looking for a master developer, that you're looking for potentially multiple developers for each of these tranches. Understood.
Okay, thank you. Just that's all I wanted to clarify.
Of course. Yeah, yeah.
Deb, where do you want to go from here?
So if we have all the questions asked and answered today, what we will do is we will continue in conversations with you 3 about contractual language, and we will, if there's any other additional insights that you would like on if you're June the 4th, excuse me, I think it's the 5th meeting, actually, June 5th, we will do a presentation, give you a report in advance, and also a proposed contract with fee. We've had some conversations. Todd answered some questions earlier about timing and how long these timings work with the kind of 3 big phases that have been identified, recognizing there'll be multiple developers likely. We are probably looking at bringing you a 2-year contract opportunity that allows them to get through those phases in all aspects of it. And so that is what we are looking at right now. So with that, we will work with Larry on the contract side and bringing something back for your consideration on June 5th. You may recall that in the project review form, we anticipated that this was going to be an ask that was coming, and so we do have that already line itemed out on the project review form, and we'll bring reference to that as well on 5th.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you for the U3 team. Very much appreciated.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate
Thank
it very
you.
much.
Take care.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
So is it okay to move on to the second item of with Beth Kate of the camera use privacy and policy presentation?
Yes, so thanks. My understanding is that in some earlier meetings, 1 or more of the commissioners had questions about whether the placement of security cameras in what Todd just referred to as the jewel of the crown in Hopewell, that green space, whether that was going to pose any legal issues to consider, and wanted a little bit of an overview of the law in this regard. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. Feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have questions. As far as the basic question goes, well, the Parks Department, as I understand it, is who would be installing the cameras. Well, their installation of security cameras in what I've seen is 4 locations along the green space, and putting cameras there to monitor that green space will violate legal rights of residents or visitors in the Hopewell neighborhood. I think the short answer is no, and I will explain why. When you look at privacy law in this regard, it's a bit of an amalgam of constitutional law, some statutory law, a bit of common law. And starting really with the Constitution, Indiana's Constitution and the 4th Amendment in the federal Constitution the text is virtually identical. They're interpreted a little bit differently, but they tend to revolve around an analysis of the reasonableness of what's happening, but I need to unpack that a little bit further too. So if you have a security camera, I mean, walk outside, you're going to see security cameras in all sorts of places out in public. And this would be a set of cameras that is recording people's movements in public that are otherwise available to be seen just by anyone who is moving around. From a constitutional standpoint, the U.S. Constitution, 4th Amendment says that the government, which is us, right, can't engage in unreasonable searches or seizures. Okay. To have an unreasonable search, you first have to have a search. And in constitutional law, to have a search, to even implicate the 4th Amendment, you have to have one of 2 things. You have to have a physical intrusion into someone's space that's protected, But that cameras on poles really don't implicate that. Because what they're doing is recording without going into someone's home, for example. And my understanding is that's what you're most concerned about is, are these cameras going to capture things that are going on in the homes surrounding that green space? So there's no physical intrusion, but you can also have a search if what is happening is the government is intruding into something in which people have a subjective and objectively reasonable expectation of privacy. Subjective meaning they've tried to do something to keep what they're doing out of the public eye, and objectively reasonable meaning that society's prepared to say, you know what, yeah, that should be private. We agree. Okay, the government should be able to take a look at that without getting a warrant, okay, without going into a court and saying, hey, we have probable cause, more likely than not, to believe a crime is occurring. For example, we need a warrant to be able to now go take a look at that. So with pole cameras, like what we're talking about, right now the law is largely that there is no search. The courts are split on this. The Supreme Court has not, the US Supreme Court has not actually heard a case right on point in this regard. They've heard a few other new technology cases about how the fact that we're all digitally enabled to record everything at every moment. They have issued a few decisions in that regard that express some concern about the ability to ubiquitously sort of record and get a mosaic of people's lives, right? Because it's very revealing. At the same time, they're being asked actually now to take a case out of Massachusetts involving pole camera surveillance, different from the sort of pole cameras we're talking about here. In that case, it's law enforcement mounting pole cameras for months and months to do intelligence gathering for law enforcement purposes, right? We would use what comes of these recordings, if needed, to address criminal activity. That case involves a focused collection of data for arrests, potentially charges, and criminal prosecution. But the Supremes haven't taken this type of case yet. The lower courts, the lower federal courts, are split a bit on this, as are state courts, looking at their own state constitutional language like we have. In Indiana, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits over Indiana and Illinois and Wisconsin, has interpreted the Fourth Amendment to say, well, no, if all you're doing is collecting the sort of footage that anyone could see when they are out and about and watching what's going on in the green space, then that's not a Fourth Amendment violation, because again, you have to have a reasonable expectation of privacy, but what we knowingly put out there to be seen by others, even in our own home. I mean, if you're walking down Old Cobb Boulevard, you're going to be able to look straight into our window and see, a bunch of stuff going on in our house. We don't have curtains, are we sort of making that known to anyone who could walk by? And police are entitled in law to be wherever anyone else is entitled to be in society. So the Seventh Circuit so far has, in those kinds of contexts, have said pole cameras are not a search. They are not an intrusion into something that is reasonably expected to be private. Facts matter. Facts always matter in these cases, and they matter in privacy law quite a bit. Because if you do take certain steps to keep things private, you build a really super high fence, right? Frankly, even if you build that high fence, the government can still fly a helicopter at 400 feet and watch you growing marijuana in your backyard, and that's not a search. But it does affect some of these cases, depending on how much people have done to try to preserve their privacy. At the end of the day, right now, although courts are expressing some generalized concerns about surveillance, if you will, they have not generally held pole cameras to present that kind of problem. If it were a search, then it would have to be a reasonable search, which means you either have to have a warrant, which is unworkable in this kind of context, or an exception to that requirement. I won't go into those details unless you really want me to, So from a constitutional standpoint, on the state side, our state constitution reads the same, is interpreted a little differently. It's basically how badly does law enforcement need the data? How intrusive is it? How much is there a basis for believing there was a concern about kind of that area that prompted the surveillance to begin with? It's very contextual. It's sort of a gestalt, totality of the circumstances, reasonableness test. I don't know that it would produce any different outcome here, where what we're basically saying, as I understand it, is we're going to mount certain cameras. They are going to be trained on the public space. They're certainly not intending to look in anyone's window. And as it turns out, the technology, and this technology is just sort of getting increasingly granular, but the technology allows for blurring of areas that you can already kind of prefab plug in and say, okay, so if our camera's trained in this area, but it might catch a sliver of window, we're gonna blur that, or we can black it out altogether. And my understanding is that with the stuff that is blacked out, you never capture the footage, so you can't unblur it and look at it. With the blurry stuff, yes, you can, but only if you have certain permissions to gain access. And that's where in most areas of privacy law, you see a huge role for policy, because that's where you put your safeguards in about, well, who's getting access to these data and for what purpose and how long do we keep them, and who sees them and that kind of thing. The city does have a policy going back to 2017 on cameras, and if you all haven't seen that yet, I'm happy to share it with you after this. But basically it says, hey, security camera footage, we're doing it for public safety purposes. We will have various safeguards in place to ensure that it's used only for that. It's kept 30 days unless the state retention schedules require, as they do in a few circumstances, a little bit longer, and then it just rolls over, gets recorded over. So if no one ever needs it for anything, nothing ever happens in that time frame, no one ever sees it. So there is a policy to regulate access. There are a couple of state statutes that I'm familiar with on cameras, but they're really not focused on this kind of issue. For example, as private citizens, we can't sneak onto, like I can't sneak onto your yard, Deb, and mount a camera without your knowledge so I can go record all of your movements. The tougher thing has been, what if I just mount a camera in my own yard, but I'm training it on your front door, and it's creepy, right, for me to watch you coming and going kind of thing. So states have been, including Indiana, trying to regulate a bit of that through some combination of state statutory law and a little bit of common law harassment type stuff. So, but all of this by way of saying, I think that the important thing is to make sure that we know where the cameras are, that we are careful about where we are training them in order to accomplish what we are looking to accomplish, which is public safety, and that safeguards are in place to make sure that the data are used for that purpose, and that whatever we can do by way of the programming of them to minimize the impact on, the incidental impact, if you will, on people's privacy, that we do that. And my understanding is we are, and we intend to, and but that's certainly something that we should keep an eye on going forward.
Questions?
No, that was wonderful.
Sure.
I have a question.
Sure, yeah. In terms of, we have the private property and development, and then people buy homes or rent them, or apartments, and then we have the public space, the green space with the cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So who's running those? Where does it all go back to? Someone sitting in a place and recording them or checking to make sure that, is that the city that will have a space, a technology space that will run that public, the cameras in that public
It's the city
venue?
who's mounting the cameras. That's my understanding, is that's going to end up being the city. I don't know if that will get handed off at some point to, if you get an HOA or something and they decide that's part of their
Does the
their
city do
private
that in
service.
any other place yet?
We have
Camera?
other security cameras
Switch
in
up.
parks. Yeah, we are, and Parks is who has been providing the information to us for this green space too. I honestly don't know if there's going to be a handoff of that at some point, depending on how the development goes. Do you have
Right now, we don't anticipate that. Right now, the green space is anticipated being operated by parks. And so it would be through the software agreement, the footage would be captured under the city of Bloomington's policy that Beth
Right.
mentioned before.
Thank you. more questions? Thank you very much for that
You're
presentation.
More than
Appreciate it.
welcome. Sure.
So we're ready to move on to the first resolution, 2341, approving amendments to the Dimension Mill Agreement. Who will make a presentation?
We have Ms. Kate here, Madam Vice President, also Mr. Crowley, and Pat East from the mill. So I don't know, Beth, if you have anything you want to say, if we want to just turn it over to others.
I can tee it up, but I think probably Pat, you may be.
You can tee it up as much as possible.
I'll tee
John
it
is
up.
the one who normally makes these presentations, so I may be a little light on some of the details.
You're fine, no worries. Okay, I'll tee it up, and then Alex, also feel free to jump in. So this resolution is effectively doing three things. One is it's proposing, and they're all centered around basically having the mill be able to take the next steps in its advancement of the tech center project. So, and that's pursuant to the agreement that the RDC and the city entered into with the mill back in January of this year. So the first thing that this resolution does is it proposes well, this may not be in the order it actually appears in the resolution, but in my head, the first thing it does is it proposes some minor amendments to the agreement that we entered into earlier, just to clarify some of the things that the mill is doing in its role as partner with the city and the RDC to advance the Trades District and the Tech Center project. So those amendments are listed in the resolution itself, and then also attached as an amendment document to the agreement that would be signed if you all approve this. And they basically clarify that the mill is an authorized representative of the RDC, that it's going to basically take on, as it even under the original agreement was doing this, we just want to make this a little bit clearer, that it's basically leading the process that produces the contracts that are coming before the RDC to advance the tech center construction and Trades District, ultimately Trades District, sales of property and activation of the Trades District as well. So that's the first thing that the resolution does, is actually add a little bit of language in a few sections of the agreement. The other two things it does are put before you two contracts relating to the tech center construction. One is a construction manager as advisor agreement with Weddle Brothers, and the other is an agreement for commissioning services from Applied Engineering Services, Inc., which would be the lead agent to help ensure that the building comes out at least LEED Silver certified. So that's in a nutshell what the resolution does. I don't know if Pat or Alex want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, I think you did a great job summarizing it, Beth. I think it's just as with any new relationship, as it progresses, we sort of run into situations where like, oh, we should probably be sure that everybody understands that which portion of the group is doing what. And so this is really meant to try to paint a clearer picture of that, both for the RDC and everybody involved. And so I just think it's a slightly, it evolves over time and may again, but at this point, this is our best view as to what the role of the mill can be and should be, how that is supported by staff and the RDC. And, we think that we're very pleased with having the mill involved in this way.
Questions from the commissioner?
Are there, just trying to picture in terms of, as let's say the mill takes on the competitive bidding and coordination with RDC, but is there the same comparable expectations for, let's say, public noticing of availability of certain resources, such as maybe part of that process? Just trying to get a sense of, as it kind of filters through from public body, public commission to nonprofit, private, how does that transparency continue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the answer is yes, there is the ongoing expectation that as the mill helps to secure various services that are going to be needed for this project, that there is kind of, that they're approaching it in the same way that the city and the RDC would, with respect to transparency, with respect to accountability, with respect to competitive bidding where that is appropriate and would otherwise be expected. I think that happened here with respect to the construction management as advisor agreement. So there was a group, including representation from the RDC, that sat on a committee that interviewed, 5 firms, I think, and they got competitive bids. Similarly with the applied engineering, I think Studio Access provided some information on folks out there who might be able to do LEED Silver Plus certification, and the mill went out and got bids from a couple of those and reviewed them. So yeah, I think the expectation is that there'll be plenty of transparency and involvement of the RDC, of the city, and so on as they go forward. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you were trying to sort of, on the one hand, right, the idea behind the partnership agreement in January was to engage the mill because of Pat's expertise and John's expertise and everyone. So they bring something to the table that, you know, the kind of the rest of us don't have and are able to kind of move forward on this using that expertise. And so we sort of don't want to get in the way of that, but are also very conscious that, you know, this public dollars that are being spent. And so it's important to have that kind of transparency and accountability.
And Beth, if I may add that, you know, in particular, with the Economic Development Administration grant building and the process of federal procurement, their rules are very, very significant and complicated. So there's an added layer in particular with that building and that process that is very, very transparent. You know, I think one might argue their rules are tougher than ours. Ours are pretty tough, but they're maybe even tougher than ours.
Yeah. And there, for example, I mean, they're reviewing all bid documents before they go out. They have to approve everything. You've seen some stuff already that's come through from the EDA side of this. So, yeah. Thanks, Alex.
And also to give you a few details of how the actual process happened. So we received, for the construction management proposal portion, we received proposals from 5 firms. We received 2 strong proposals from Water Brothers and Shield Sexton, one in Bloomington, one in Indy. Did interviews, followed Q&As, and then our evaluation team agreed that Water Brothers was the top choice. Those folks included, the evaluation team was Jim Pearl from the BDC, Alex, Beth Kate, and Jeff Underwood from the city, Ashley Thornberry and Drew White from Studio Access, and then John from the mill. And then for the lead commissioning agent, those folks were recommended by Studio Access, Applied Engineering, and Midwest Associates. Both firms were really capable, and we selected Applied Engineering as they were materially less expensive. So just to give you a little bit of like actual on the ground, here's what we actually did with the process.
Any comments from the public?
Can I have a quick?
Oh, yes, sorry, Randy.
Sorry. Bad habit. Quick question in regards to Applied Engineering, since they are looking to enter contractually through the mill for the LEED certification. And I know it's not going to happen, but I have to bring up the specter. If for whatever reason, due to our unknown economic times, that the building didn't get built, will be a contractual aspect because it's for the LEED certification.
I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. My communication skills.
No,
So,
it's good.
If they're the lead commissioning agents, and for God knows what reason, it doesn't get built.
Right.
How can,
do
we still,
get paid?
yeah, is there a contractual aspect where we'll owe them some for what they've done, but the whole thing?
Oh, yeah, I
'Cause it
mean, I
wouldn't-
think we would pay for work that was performed, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that was what you were asking, yeah.
Yeah, I should have.
They will have performed the work, whether or
Right,
not.
performing of the work for the contractual aspect, whether, yeah, and I expect it fully to get built. I just have to ask that question in regards to it. And then the second and last question in regards to it, do we have the ability to encumber through the RDC the CREED funds?
No, those are already encumbered by city council.
Okay, so
So those are dedicated, sorry.
No, go ahead and jump in.
They're passed by the additional appropriation ordinance that was specifically targeted for this project.
okay, so that's already been approved. So as we approve this resolution, we're not approving something that's not already been taken care of.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
The money that city council approved for this project's already gonna be
It's
there
it,
as
and it'll
part
be,
of
and
what's
it's
covering
coming
this
from the
project.
creed.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
okay.
Well, some, right? I mean,
Some.
this project is sort of an amalgam of some CREED funds, some TIF funds, the EDA grant.
Yeah.
So it's got a few pieces to it, but
Right.
yeah, that's certainly part.
Okay, thank you.
If I may just remind the RDC that the reason we have LEED certification is the Green Building Ordinance, which requires of city facilities, city-owned and built facilities, that they be LEED Silver at a minimum. So that is this is driven by ordinance, and it's a level of expertise that allows us to deliver against that we wanted to have on board to ensure that we adhere to that requirement.
Thanks, Alex.
Appreciate it.
Any comments from the public? Not hearing or seeing any, I'll entertain a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 23-41.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. So the next resolution is number 2342, approval of construction agreement with Milestone for Hopewell Phase 1 East. Who will speak to us on that?
Good evening, Max Meadows with
Hi.
Engineering Department. The Phase 1 East infrastructure project includes construction of new roadway, sidewalks, multi-use path, and park amenities. The city received 2 bids for this project, with the lowest one coming from Milestone at an amount of $13,373,284.90, and that amount includes all 3 of the alternates that were bid with the project. Seeking approval of the agreement with Milestone tonight from the commission, and then we also are on the agenda with the Board of Public Works next week. We would need their permission also. The project would start this summer and scheduled to be completed by the end of October in 2024. Be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
Does it fit into our budget?
Been told it does. Larry, you?
Yeah, it was, so originally estimated just by way of, so originally in the project review form, there was $13,087,869 in it. So this is a little bit more than that, but we've amended that just to reflect the additional cost. Deb, do you want to weigh in on the additions?
Yeah, absolutely. So you may recall our discussion at your last meeting about the project review form, that the sources that were identified, we didn't have all the uses identified for that entire source that was approved by the Redevelopment Commission at your last meeting. So we do think this is a wise use of some of those unallocated use sources that were identified there. I think it's approximately $285,000, something like that we would reallocate into that particular line item. But this keeps us on track for the Phase 1 East infrastructure to go in and to be ready for development to begin hopefully building in 2024. So it should line up nicely.
Okay. Do we have contingency built into this? I mean, I know some. I'm just making sure.
I believe we had 10% built in.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Deborah? No questions from me. Any questions from the public? Seeing none and hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. Randy, your turn.
Okay, Randy Cassidy, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 23-42.
I'll second that. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to resolution 2343, lease modification and acceptance of equipment for Showers West. Who will speak to this?
I will. As you know, once you purchased the CFC Showers Business Plaza, which is we also call Showers West, we're trying out some different names, so you might see some different names floated around about that. We obviously assumed the leases as part of the facility. And one of those leases was for a fitness center. The lease was held by Cook Incorporated. They want to terminate that lease at the same time that CFC is getting out of the building, so that would be June 1st. But in exchange for that, they've also agreed to leave behind the equipment if the RDC would accept that, and we could possibly use that as gym equipment. So that is essentially what that lease modification is. It would terminate their lease as of June 1st, but would have you accepting all of the very pristine and very nice gym equipment that you see listed as part of the attachments. And then there's a second lease modification. We just decided to put these together since they were coming at the same time. And this is for Sycamore Realty. Their lease originally went through next January, and they asked for early termination. They in fact have moved out of the building, and so we have been in negotiation with them, and this modification would have a retroactive date of April 1st, 2023 of a lease move out, and they would just make sure that they fully paid up from the time, basically from the time we purchased, February until April 1st in rent. And so those are the two modifications attached as Exhibits A and B to the resolution.
Questions from commissioners?
How does that early termination just affect overall, kind of expected revenues compared to, the full, obviously at some point the city is moving forward with the renovation of the building, but there was the assumption that there would be some revenue from current tenants. So I'm just wondering how that impacts that revenue.
Yeah, not significantly, a great deal. Cook's is probably the most significant in terms of the rent that they were paying for the early termination. Now again, we're getting some value that's on top of what we had there. Let me pull it up here. I can tell you what their actual rent was. For Sycamore Realty, it's much less. I think they were paying around $2,000 a month. So we're talking about 8 months, so $16,000 in revenue lost. Relatively, it was one suite, so it's a relatively small loss. For Cook Group, let's see here. Just give me one moment. Excuse me. I know you all look excited to watch me scroll through spreadsheets after spreadsheets looking for this.
We can talk about other cases before the Supreme Court. They've got one on a dog toy that is a replica of a Jack Daniels bottle. And the question is whether it's violating their intellectual property rights. A little bit more interesting maybe than some of their other fairness here, but.
It is interesting though, that particular one that came up. It's like, okay, I mean, it's, it's a hard one.
Yeah.
And then have you read much about the 94-year-old that did on the property tax aspect to the Supreme Court?
No.
On public-private taking based upon the tax liens.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a 94-year-old woman that went into assisted living. It's in the Supreme Court, was heard by the Supreme Court a couple weeks ago.
I did hear about this case. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's pretty interesting in regards to how it is. I mean, Indiana happens to be one of those states where it's not an issue, but
Yeah.
it was one of those, like, wow.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, no, it is. It's fascinating.
that stuff's just amazing.
We have a nursing home case out of Indiana in the Supreme Court. Sorry, I'm
Oh,
totally
sorry.
derailing the
Oh, yeah,
meeting.
sorry.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Larry.
I would give Larry a little time here.
Well, no, I got it.
Bring us back.
The monthly rent for the Cook Group Incorporated, there's a graduated rent. So for 2023, right now it's $5,200, $5,250 a month. Their lease went through the end of 2025. So there is a more significant there. It's probably about $130,000 plus the rest of this year. So although I will say, I don't know if we have a valuation tied to all that equipment. It's a pretty significant offset. I don't know if it's quite that much, obviously, but it's a pretty significant offset. The other thing that we have to also take into consideration, this is part of the risk mitigation aspect of this, is if we start construction on the site pretty soon, this is a relatively large footprint in the first floor of the building, which at least in preliminary designs was part of both the secure police department and then also potentially the connector going through to each side of the building. So it is a pretty important space that we needed to take some control over.
So you're saying that it's a good idea to get them gone?
That's correct.
Just it leaves us space to do that, freedom to do that.
That's correct.
As we need to,
Yep.
and sooner. Questions? More?
2 questions in regards to one, did Sycamore stay in town?
Yeah, they have a representation here. They're still looking for office space, but my understanding is they have 1 or 2 employees that are still active here.
Okay. It's always good to have, additional businesses stay in our community as opposed to the situation where we leave. Small business is the heart of America. So. Okay, and then on our machine and accepting the fitness equipment, are we utilizing that for the city for that, or are we gonna leave it as a fitness? And is it based upon the fact that it'll be now owned municipally, we'll have limited liability if someone did happen to hurt themselves?
So right now, immediately it's not going to be open to the public or anybody else. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, stretch my head, I'm sorry.
The hope is the conception is that would be open to not just the police department, not just the fire department, but other city employees as well. Of course, there is a liability release, or at least a notice posted. We have what is called a fitness facility in this building. It is a broken treadmill, rowing machine, and an exercise bike that is kind of use at your own risk and only during business hours. This is a significant upgrade, but I think as a part of that usage, probably the legal department, we would look into just having a draft release of liability. That's pretty standard for gyms.
So that works. Well, basically, by them leaving this, we're able to provide fitness activities for the employees of the city as a whole without having to leave work, go elsewhere.
Yeah, and that would be that's a very significant upgrade in value to the employees for sure.
Yeah, well,
We are still looking at it. So I will caveat it with this, is like one of the considerations of course, is like, how does it fit within the design of the building, which, as you know, we're still in the process of developing, and how will that go with the security of the police department and things like so. There are some caveats to just things to work out within the city, but the current plan is for that to be accessible to everyone.
and you've already got the equipment, so you can always relocate. We still got, 30,000 square feet on top of what the police and fire need, so appreciate it. Okay.
Finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
So with regard to this equipment and this fitness room, right now it's in Showers West, so-called. So do you perceive that it, as a fitness room, and this equipment won't be used until the space is renovated, and therefore, and it's in the space that needs to be renovated? So will it be put in storage or something so no one can use it and get hurt while it's not being supervised, put away, understand how much it is, and the designers, the architects, et cetera, will work on that?
Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case. And we haven't had internal discussions yet about whether that might be open temporarily, while the designing phase is going. I mean, it's not, we wouldn't anticipate construction starting until probably next year at the earliest. Obviously, you all haven't seen a contract, so we're not ready to go at this point. So there might be an opportunity there to actually just open it up for potential usage earlier than that.
So who would supervise it in that case, in the temporary?
Again, so supervising it's a kind of a different issue. So it's right now the way it operates is it's private access. It's private access by a key card. We are also, as you know, from the approval, we're in the process of switching over to that key card system as well. So it's conceivable that we would be able to regulate it by the use of badges and key cards.
But who would be checking that it's not broken, that it's the weights are put away?
Yeah,
or,
we rely on the people participating in that and looking at it and making sure that as they use it, if there's anything that's broken or missing, that they would report that.
To whom?
To the city facilities manager, probably JD Borough, and then he would pass that on to us. Make sure that
Because that's a big responsibility, as you said. It's almost you're thinking it's somewhat of an offset to $100,000 loss in rent. That's big chunk of change, and in replacing it would be more cost to us. So supervision is maybe too strong a word, but oversight or something needs to be rest somewhere, in my opinion.
And that's also one of the important parts of having the inventory list from the bill of sale as well, here with that, to make sure that we have something in check. So when it does go into storage or when it comes back out, do we have everything? Is this the right inventory? Is this what we're looking at?
Good, thank you. Any comments from the public in the room? Not seeing any. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve 23-43 to accept the resolution to terminate the leases and accept equipment.
I will second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Is there any other new business we haven't discussed? A reminder to everyone that the next RDC meeting is 3 weeks away. It's on the calendar as Monday, June the 5th. And with that, could I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
So passed. Thank you, everyone.